Good day, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of Accelerated Learning 101. We'll just do a little slide and sound check here. So please do let me know that you can hear my voice and see the slide. And I'm also going to do a slide transition. So hopefully you could see the slides, you can see the transitions, and you can hear my voice. I shall wait until I hear from a couple of people to that effect. So I see that there are 7 of us in attendance. That's great. It appears a couple of people could not make it again tonight. So as soon as I get some feedback as to the sound, we shall begin. Sorry, I was just speaking, the mic was on, so let me repeat that. Thanks for your feedback. It looks like we're good for visuals and audio. So without further ado, let's begin. I'm going to continue from last day. And what I'm going to do is just a super quick review. And I added a couple things for tonight's session regarding memory, as you can see in the 5th point. So we covered the first 4 points on the basics of memory. I'm adding a couple of more memory techniques, and we'll actually be starting with memory. We looked at the ideal mental states for learning, some of the brain waves that are ideal for learning. We went through a mental programming exercise, and I told you a little bit about heart intelligence and how heart coherence is good for brain coherence. Then we're going to actually be starting, once we do some of those memory techniques, we'll start into a new topic entirely, which is how to distribute your sessions, your learning sessions over time. And what's the ideal learning times and breaks and review strategies and so forth. We'll look at the basic rest and activity cycles and the power of bell entrainment. Then we're going to look at how to encode information efficiently using multisensory formats and visualization, mind maps, writing skills, and multisensory techniques to enrich your neural networks around new content. And finally, we'll look at some advanced learning strategies. These are just kind of extras, icing on the cake to help you out. They're quick techniques. In some cases, it gets pretty involved, as is the case with food and music, but the reading techniques are pretty quick to explain, as is the sleep learning cycle. So we looked at memory systems before last week. And just a quick review, we've got the sensory memory, the working or short-term memory, and the long-term memory. Now remember, sensory memory is very quick. It's just, it's like a type of memory that sort of encapsulates your visual and auditory and tactile world. And that's on the order of 200 to 400 milliseconds, or less than a half a second, whereas for auditory memory, the echoic memory would be 2 to 4 seconds. Then we got working or short-term memory, when you're juggling items, try and repeat them, elaborate on them to get them into long-term memory. And long-term memory can be infinite. So that's when we're storing information in our brains, and then we recall it or retrieve it when we need to. So why do we forget? Well, this is another example of the stage model of memory that I just put up on the screen. In this case, they're showing the decay time. So sensory memory has got to be pretty short. In the case of vision, it's 200 to 400 milliseconds, or 0.2 to 0.4 seconds. In the case of echoic memory, as I just said, it's 2 to 4 seconds. Okay. Now, what happens is we don't attend to something, well, it just decays and it goes away. So the key there is attention in that first stage. Haptic memory is just the memory of touch. Working memory or short-term memory, again, we need to work with items or they're forgotten. We can usually encompass 7 plus or 2 chunks or items. And working memory is 15 to 30 seconds. That's decay. Things are forgotten after that time if they're not elaborated on or repeated. And then decay is also an issue for long-term memory and also interference. So if we're not using information that we've learned a long time ago, it can just decay or fade away. It may be there, it's just a lot harder to access. And also there's interference both when we're inputting new memories. From short-term to long-term, there can be interference in that process, and also interference when we're trying to retrieve. So interference is a big deal. So let's elaborate on that a little bit more about why we forget. As I said, decay is what happens when information is naturally degraded over time. There's different time spans. The decay is super short for sensory memory. It's on the order of seconds in terms of short-term memory, and long-term memory, it depends. It can be weeks, months, years. Depends on the nature of the information, how well it was stored. So over time, things can fade. As a musician, if you haven't practiced a piece in 10 years, it can be very difficult to play, if you can play it at all. But again, it depends how well it was learned in the first place. Now, inattention, that's when people say, "Oh, I forgot where I put my keys." It's not that you forgot; it's that you did not attend. You did not attend to where you placed the keys. So, for instance, you could just kind of throw them down somewhere and don't pay attention, and then of course you don't remember where you put them because you weren't attending to that. So that's inattention is the very first stage involved in sensory memory. You need to first attend to the information and concentrate on it for a specific period of time for it to get eventually encoded. Now, interference is a big deal. Interference, interruptions, distractions can impact both short-term memory and long-term memory. It can impact the process of transferring short-term memories into long-term memory. And it can also impact the consolidation or the storage of memory in long-term, and also it can create a problem at the retrieval stage when you're trying to recall something. If you're interrupted or distracted when you're trying to remember something, or if you're stressed out, that can impact the ability to retrieve memories. Maybe it's there solidly, but you're distracted or you're in a bad mood, or there can be various things that distract us or interrupt the process of retrieval. But the actual process of storing or encoding information in long-term memory, if that's problematic, then you're not actually encoding the memory properly, and that's why it's difficult to retrieve. So there can be very many reasons why we forget information or can't retrieve it or recall it. Poor organization, that has to do with how we're encoding information. If we organize it poorly in the way we're sort of assimilating the information, then again, there's difficulties retrieving that stored information. Maybe there, but it's just there in a very inefficient format, we'll say, or it's not strongly encoded in neural networks. Okay, so it may be very fuzzy, it may be confused with other items, which is why you can't retrieve it properly. So organization, interference, or interruptions, inattention, decay, these are all reasons why we may forget information or have trouble retrieving it, and this can occur at various stages of the memory according to this three-stage model. So transferring information from short-term to long-term memory, what are some of the techniques? Well, just basic repetition or rehearsal increases retention. So you need to remember a number, phone number, you just repeat it many times. Grouping similar items together also facilitates encoding. So when you're learning new information, grouping similar items together can help. Also, there may be patterns that you see in, for instance, even a phone number. There may be, 613-363-8822. So you can kind of chunk that into, 4 chunks instead of 7 numbers. Also, auditory patterns help when you're memorizing a phone number. I often remember according to the auditory pattern. You may also remember it according to the pattern. If you've dialed it many times on the phone, you just kind of remember what the pattern is. The chunking is very important memory technique. Elaboration, that's just adding meaning and context. That will improve the consolidation of information into long-term memory. When you're learning, say, a complex topic like psychology or classical conditioning or about the brain, you really need to do more than just repeat the information. That's great for simple items, but complex information, repeating is not the most efficient way. You want to chunk it, elaborate it, add meaning, make sense of it, and also add associations, which is really much of learning has to do with association. What we're basically doing is we're taking knowledge that we already have about a topic and we're associating the new information to the existing knowledge. We tend to just do that automatically. But associations are very powerful. We think about classical conditioning with Pavlov's dog, and the dogs eventually associate the sound of the bell with the food. And so they salivate at the sound of the bell alone without even seeing the food. So they've, it's a classical conditioning response. There's a stimulus, there's response, and then the response has been conditioned and associated with a new conditioned stimulus, which is the bell. So that's classical conditioning, but when we're looking at complex bodies of knowledge, again, association is the key. Learning new languages, again, you're associating information you already know to try and learn a new language. There's lots of sort of memory mnemonics, and I'll be giving you examples of a few of those mnemonics. These are, again, shortcuts, tools for enhancing memory. Here's an example of a few. Acronym you're well aware of. Oh my God, talk to you later. I'm not sure if anybody knows the FIFO, that's first in, first out. It's associated with computer science and computers. I'm not sure if anybody knows what laser is. If you know what that is, put it in the chat box right now. If anybody happens to know that, that would be great. Just to let me know, it's not a commonly known acronym, but laser is an acronym. Each of those letters stand for a separate word. And then it was just shortened to laser. So I'm just going to go, I'm going to wait. I'm going to go on to the other points because it takes about 30 to 40 seconds for me to see the output in the chat from my point of view. Now, acrostic is different from an acronym. Here you're trying to learn a sequence of items, say with different letters, starting with different letters, initial letters of the words. In this case, this is an acrostic for the ordering of the planets. You've got Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So then the acrostic is: my very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas. The initial letters of each of those words will be a clue to the first letter of the planet. Now in this case there's 2 M's, so you'd have to remember that Mercury is first. And Mercury is one of the smaller planets. So there's an acrostic. Another example, every good boy deserves fun, is a way to remember the lines on the treble clef. Every good boy deserves fun. EGBDF. So keywords are great for learning definitions, great for foreign vocabulary, great for linking names to faces. These are more in-depth techniques that I don't have time to go into because this is like more within the scope of a full day accelerated learning program, 6 to 8 hours. But just to give you an example of foreign vocabulary, for instance, it helps if you can take the vocabulary, say, voiture, which is car in French. And voiture sounds like vulture, so you can imagine a car with a vulture on top of it. Or la plage, which is beach. La plage sounds like applause. So you could imagine a team of people applauding and shouting loudly and wildly on a beach, and that would be your keyword that would be tied into an image, which would then bring up the foreign language word. So that's an example of using keywords. Keywords can be used for many other things. And then pegs are a complex visual system that is used to memorize random list of objects in order. You can remember 20, 40, 100. They teach this in Dynamind and Silva method. They teach a particular peg method. It's pretty amazing what you can commit to memory. It's just what you're basically doing is linking an existing set of 20 pegs that you then attach random words to. So you need to visualize. Visualizing is the sort of memory glue that pulls that system together, that helps it to work. The method of loci was used in Greek times to remember lots of information. So for instance, what you're doing is associating random words with places or locations. They can be places on your body or locations in your house that you know very well, and you just tack on that word or that object or that item to those various places, and you have a preset order that you've memorized in your house or on your body, so that when you just attach different items to your house or the places on your body, you will then be able to call them back up. So again, visualization is very important with this method that the Greeks used. And then finally, we have linking to memorized a random list of events in order. So again, this uses visualization. If what you can do is link. You can link some vivid imagery to random, say, events, and you make them very dynamic, and you link one event to another. So if I had more time, I could give examples of all this stuff, but this is not the point of this workshop, is not to give you all these mnemonics. But in a live workshop, this is the kind of thing that I can spend lots of time working with you and giving lots of examples and actually trying this stuff out. So I just added this decided to add a couple extra things for you regarding memory. Hope you like that. Now we'll actually start where we left off last day about distributing information for maximum recall. So the learning sessions are very important. And oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, in case you didn't know what laser meant. I don't see that anybody has responded here in the chat. So laser just stands for light amplification by the stimulated emission of radiation. Light amplification by the stimulated emission of radiation, that's what that stands for. So let's get back to where we are. So brief learning sessions are ideal. You might have heard about going for 50 minutes or an hour and a half. It depends whether you're doing work, working with information that you're already familiar with, or pure learning. If it's pure learning, then you want those sessions to be shorter. Productivity could be 50 minutes with a 10-minute break. Those are a good productivity session for getting work done. But in terms of learning, you want to reduce that by half. 20 to 25 minutes is ideal. And that will maximize your learning efficiency and your memory recall. Now, the thing is, you can probably go for an hour and a half, but the problem is there's a learning curve there, and your retention and your encoding is going down very quickly after you pass 30, 40 minutes. You might not be aware of it. You think you're still alert and you're taking information, but the problem is the retention and recall will be impacted, and it's a slippery slope, and often we're not aware of that degradation of the encoding process. This is all based on something called the primacy recency effect, which has to do with the place on a list of items dictates how much we remember it. So for instance, here's a serial position curve for a bunch of items or words. So the first words or objects in that list are the ones that have the highest percentage of recall, and also the most recent items on the list have the highest percentage of recall. You can see that the recency effect there is almost as good as the primacy effect, the first items that are seen, and the last items that are seen, the first few and the first. And then you can see in the middle, there's a huge decrease in memory retention. It goes down significantly, all the way down as far as 20% versus up to 90% for those first couple of items, and around 70% for those last few items. So you can see that there's this primacy recency effect, which explains why having shorter sessions is better. Because what happens is, if you have a number of mini sessions, if you say, for instance, instead of going for 2 hours straight, you have 6 sessions, well, you're going to have all these primacy recency effects, but they'll be reduced. And if you average it out, what happens is, overall, you're going to lose less information, because that middle part will be shorter, just because you've got like a 10 to 20 minute learning session versus 60 minutes or 90 or 2 hours. Hope that makes sense. So now, systematic review. Embedded within that 25-minute learning session is a review session. You can do 5 minutes, you can do as much as up to 1/3 of your learning session would be just reviewing what you just learned. So say you're going for 25 minutes, you can go 7 minutes of that would be pure review. So that review is included in that 25-minute learning session that I just told you about. There's where you're learning, reading new information. So review is, again, it's just reviewing. It's just like, what did I just learn? And you go back over it. And the reason that's important, because they found that reviewing material frequently can boost memory recall by up to 300%. Now, if we were, again, had more time to go into this, there's more sophisticated review techniques where you review right after the session, right after that session, so after the first 18 to 20 minutes, you review. You would review at the end of your full learning session for that day. Then you would review after 7 days. Now, this is to really embed the knowledge deeply. You have all these systematic review sessions that are spread over time, immediately, and then daily, and then weekly, and so forth. That's a more sophisticated reviewing technique that takes a lot of discipline. Now, the reason, this is the forgetting curve, and it's the reason why we need to review. Because, say, they're looking at same day, 1 day versus 2 weeks versus 9 weeks, you can see that the bottom curve is without review. So that bottom curve with the yellow dots, that first day, so you have 100% retention, going down to about just over 40% after the first day. After 2 weeks, you're down to about 25%, and it kind of tapers off to about 20% after 9 weeks. So if you don't really review at all, you're going to go down to about 20% capacity. Okay, versus if you review, you can see the top curve with the red dots. After 9 weeks, you still got about 70, just over 70% retention or ability to recall. That's why they talk about up to 300% boost in memory recall if you review versus not reviewing. So you're comparing it to that 9 week interval. So you're just over 20% to just over 70%. It's over 300% increase in retention or ability to recall information. So you see the power of review. Again, students that don't review properly, they read stuff a couple times, they think they understand it because they understand it real time, but they're not able to call that information back up or reproduce it. So that's what differentiates an A student from a C student. But this is pertinent for us here. It doesn't matter if you're studying information academically. You want to be able to remember it if it's important for you to remember it. So frequent breaks, again, embedded into this whole thing is these learning sessions of 25 minutes. You want to take about a 5 or 6 minute break after that 25-minute learning session. So you're interspersing short breaks during which you're focusing on something totally different. Ideally, you want to do some physical activity or listen to music or play music, maybe get something to eat. Not a heavy meal, just a quick snack, a superfood, or take a drink of water. So, as I just mentioned, physical activity is great, like exercise or music. And here, this is called the Pomodoro technique, which kind of encapsulates what I've been telling you. You set your timer for 25 minutes. Don't forget the review session is included within that 25 minutes. You work until the timer rings, and then you take a short 5-minute break. And they suggest to repeat this 4 times. And after you've done this 4 times, then you would take a longer break, 15 to 30 minutes. Now, what you could do is divide it up into 3 times because of something called the BRAC rhythms, basic rest and activity cycles, which on average are 90 minutes. So, it would be great at that 90-minute point to take your 15 to 30-minute break, because that's when natural brain cycles start to slow down. You need to relax at that point. You may get tired or mental fatigue. So probably might be ideal to actually repeat this 3 times instead of 4, just because of that BRAC concept, which we're about to talk about. So these BRAC rhythms, again, BRAC stands for basic rest and activity cycle. Basic rest activity cycle for maximum recall. This is a cycle your brain is cycling naturally throughout the day from fast alert activity, faster brain waves to slower brain waves. You feel more relaxed, perhaps even tired or sluggish. And this tends to go on average for 90-minute periods. Now, actually, it's the actual range is 80 to 120 minutes. So it varies per time of day and person, etc. So what they found is something interesting. The top performers get the maximum efficiency when they practice uninterrupted for 90-minute sessions times 3. So 90-minute sessions, breaks in between, times 3. And they actually did a study with violinists, and they found this was the optimal situation to practice for 90 minutes. Now, again, that seems to contradict what I told you about the learning sessions. But here we're looking at physical activity of playing a violin. We're also looking at an area where that performer already knows their area very well, and they're learning, say, new pieces, just learning new pieces of music or practicing existing pieces of music, which is a lot different than just pure cognitive information, learning information. That's quite challenging and more challenging, and you should apply those 25-minute sessions. So again, this was specific to playing music. Violinists who are accomplished at their instrument already know how to play and how to do the fingering. They're not learning a new instrument from scratch. So top performers tend to practice uninterrupted for 90 minutes, and these tend to be, it's best practicing in the morning, and 3 sessions is ideal, not more than 3. So this kind of overlaps with this idea of block time that I said you can go for 50 to 60 minutes, or some productivity experts suggest up to 90 minutes. So 50-minute sessions or 90. I've heard both of those for people that are very extraordinary performers or very disciplined marketers that get a lot done. So again, to summarize all this, it's important to take a break during your brain's natural downtime. The learning mantra here is focus, then rest. Focus, then rest. And here's a picture of this in the graphical terms. You can see here a 90-minute session, a 90 minutes of that curve. So the whole thing would be, in this case, 110 minutes. So they're showing sort of at the longer end of that average, of that range. So you have that 90-minute cycle, and then that last 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, is what's called the healing response. It's when your brainwaves slow down. It's when you might feel tired or sluggish. So if you push through that when you're learning new information, you're going to not encode that information. properly, you're going to have difficulty concentrating, etc. Now remember what we suggested, those 25-minute sessions. So you're going to take advantage of that, the shorter learning sessions, for maximum memory recall. But here we look at the, you definitely don't want to push it past 90 minutes. And this is true when you're doing the sort of block time or productivity sessions. So I hope this is not confusing with the 90 versus the 25 minutes. Those are ideal learning sessions. This is the basic rest activity cycle where you definitely need to rest when you're doing something towards the end of that 90-minute session. Now the average is 90 minutes, but it goes from 80 to 110 minutes. Okay, here they've shown sort of the maximum, 110. So there you go. So if there's any questions, we can stop briefly, and then if not, we'll continue. So another sound check just to make sure everyone can hear me. And if anybody has any questions, I can answer them super quickly. So yeah, I don't seem to have many questions here, so that's great. If you happen to think of a question while I'm talking, you can post that in the chat to me privately or publicly, and I'll get to it during our next break, which will be after this next module on encoding. So now we're looking at encoding. That was how to distribute your learning sessions over time. It's extremely important that you do those breaks, even if you think you're focused and alert. Again, you can only go longer if it's a topic that you're familiar with or you're working at something. Then you can go for 50 to 60 minutes or even up to 90 minutes and be productive. But when you're learning pure cognitive information, new information that you're trying to assimilate for the first time, that's when you want to go on those 25-minute sessions according to the Pomodoro technique. This is an accelerated learning technique, and it does work. Now, let's look at mind maps, the art and science of mind maps and the parallelism of the brain. So this is a visual tool for organizing, learning, or reviewing information on a specific topic. And mind maps are useful because they actually mirror the parallel processing capabilities of the brain. And what we find is that many learning environments, especially in academia or conferences, or even in the workplace, tend to emphasize reading linear text, reading books and so forth, or seeing text on a screen as somebody's presenting in a PowerPoint or a keynote. So there's just a lot of text there. So we're in sort of a text-based learning world, but the brain is actually highly visual, parallel, and hierarchical in nature. Okay, so if the brain is as very visual, parallel, and hierarchical, what's the best way to consolidate information? Well, it turns out mind maps have been around for quite a while, and they were invented by Tony Buzan. And there's an example of a mind map about how to do mind maps. So in the middle, what you have is the main topic. Notice the use of color, notice the use of branches. The branches extend out to the subtopics, and then the further, smaller branches are roots, or further branching out from those main subtopics. And you can do this to as much detail as you can fit on a page or a piece of paper. You don't want to put too much information such that you can't read it. The important idea here is the big picture topics, and the important thing here is you can see it's laid out in parallel. You see it sort of all at once, at a glance, rather than linearly, as in is the style of a book. So you see the different colors, you see the thicker lines from the main topics and the thinner lines for the branched out or subtopics. And the main ideas here are start at the center and branch out. In the lower right, you want to use lots of images, color, and the words should be just, again, simple words. They should be printed and not capitalized because it's easier for the brain to, the visual systems to encode printed words versus capitalized. And you want to, the lines should be flowing organic. The thickness of line should reflect the level in the hierarchy of your concept. So you can see that they're getting thinner. And again, you want to use imagery. You want to have little drawings and so forth. It takes quite a while to do this, but it's worthwhile if you've got information that you want to remember, either for a presentation or for information you're learning in an academic situation or you want to teach. So it should be beautiful, personal, and you want to emphasize those pictures. And single words are good, or a pair of words. Now, there's software to do this for you automatically, and for both the Mac and the PC. You can get lots of free downloads for both the Mac and PC. The only downside to that is, although it's a bit faster to do with the software, you don't get the benefit of the tactile. You don't get the benefit of doing it from scratch. Because when you get your hands involved, there's an advantage there. And when you're drawing things in color, again, there's an advantage because you're actually doing it. You're more involved. You're more concentrated and focused on the task. So there's a trade-off there. You can get the software, it's a bit faster, but the memory encoding may be enhanced because you're doing it yourself. There's the tactile and the visual. Now we see an example of a mind map on health. You can see the 5 main branches, different colors. The branch in the top left is sleep, which is in green. Stress impacts health. You can see magenta on the top right corner. Exercise is important for our health, both our physical health and brain health. You see here aerobics and flexibility training, so forth, in the blue branch. And then we see on the left bottom corner, diet is important, of course, for health and brain health in particular. That's in orange. We can see here they're talking about vitamins and fiber and low fat. That's actually a myth about the fat, but we already talked about that in the level 1 course. So notice there's lots of pictures, notice there's lots of drawings, there's lots of cartoon type pictures and single words or phrases with 2 words. You don't see big long sentences. If you start putting sentences there, you defeat the purpose of doing this. But this is actually a really good big picture approach. It's hierarchical, it's parallel, and it's visual. And all those properties are how information is encoded in the brain: the parallel structure, the visual structure, and the hierarchical structure, and the color structure. So those four attributes are all embedded into the mind map: color, hierarchy, parallelism, and visual. So we're going to move on here, and we'll just do. I'm going to do a quick poll. So which do you think? What's the important thing about mind maps? Here, if you could just answer, I'll start the poll momentarily. Is it a parallel processing, linear, or is it both? What do you think? What's the main attribute there for mind maps in the brain? So if you just answer that quickly, and then we'll continue. So this is also a good way for us to take a break and take a pause. This should be a fairly straightforward poll to answer. So you just respond to that now, and I'll display. I'm going to wait a few more seconds till everyone's answered. So the answer I was looking for was parallel. But that was kind of tricky because I threw in that both, and it appears that there's both linear and parallel dimensions. But primarily the reason mind maps are used is because of the parallel processing aspect of it, and that you can see sort of in a glance everything. Certainly there is a linear aspect, but that's not primary, it's the parallel. But for those that said both, I'll give you that as correct too, because it's easy to confuse. So I think had I not put both, everybody would have said parallel. And so I will give you an A+ for everybody. Okay, so let's continue. So now we're going to visualization. Here's the thing about visualization. Your brain cannot tell the difference between what you imagine seeing, hearing, doing, touching, saying, and what you actually see or hear or do or touch or say. Now you can tell the difference, yes, but your brain cannot. Okay, that's the distinction. What do I mean by that? Well, we'll get to that momentarily, but I'm sure you've probably heard this, that the top athletes, like triathletes, Ironman triathletes, and the best celebrities, and also, you know, Olympic athletes, of course, they have to be at the top of their game. So they not only physically practice, but they visualize. They mentally rehearse their ideal outcome, which gives them that extra bit of juice, that extra bit of performance enhancement. Because they're visualizing ahead of time. They're mentally rehearsing their performance. They're mentally rehearsing their playing a violin concerto, or running, or swimming, whatever it happens to be. Or say you have to do a presentation, you want to visualize a great outcome, you actually visualize yourself, you mentally rehearse yourself having a phenomenal outcome. I used to do this before when I was sort of dealing with the public speaking issue, and it really helped. The mental rehearsal really helped. Because what people tend to do is they play worry movies. They visualize negative outcomes. They worry about what's going to happen. You're actually programming that in advance in your brain, so you might as well program something positive. So the reason this works is, again, the reason that mentally rehearsing outcomes ahead of time works is because of what I said, that first point, that you're actually activating the same areas of the brain, whether you see something or imagine seeing it, whether you hear a piece of music or imagine hearing the music. Okay, so every time you learn something new, whether it's a piece of text or auditory or visual format, you want to attempt to visualize it. Now, visualize means see it or hear it in your mind's eye or ear. So there's studies that back up what I'm saying about that imagination piece, that first point. They've done studies and they've shown that when someone practices the piano for a week, practices scales, and they have someone imagining practicing, the same circuitry associated with the fingers of the hands are actually enriched and changed just from imagining. So by imagining playing the piano, you're actually activating that same circuitry and you're changing it. Same if they had an experiment where you had a group A practicing hoops, group B simply imagined practicing hoops, and the group that practiced the hoops did better than the control group that did nothing. But interestingly, the group that simply imagined throwing hoops did almost as good. Their performance was enhanced almost as much as the group that actually physically practiced. So that's the power of imagination. So again, you want to visualize something to help ingrain that information or to enhance your performance, whether it be public speaking, playing a piece of music, or running a race. And I've already mentioned this, but the visualization is not limited to the visual modality. We can think of visualizing more broadly to encompass the other modalities, like the tactile and auditory modalities. Writing it down is important because it involves your kinesthetic or tactile brain. Passive reading is insufficient to fully digest new information, and that's what we tend to do in school. We just read a lot of books, and it's not the best way to fully comprehend information. You definitely have to add other techniques in there, memory techniques, learning techniques, etc. So you want to incorporate physicality because that enriches the learning process, because you're activating motor and somatosensory areas of the brain, and that just enriches the memories at a neurological level because you're actually pulling in different areas of the brain. So you'll have a distributed memory that involves, say, for instance, the tactile areas, motor areas, auditory areas, and visual areas. So you got a distributed memory that's more robust and reliable, if that makes sense. And the other thing about writing is that it's very different from typing on a keyboard. There's a minimum number of hand movements involved in typing compared with writing. It's neurologically a lot more complex behavior to write compared with typing. So for that reason alone, whether you're learning information, writing down information in order to consolidate it, memorize it, or you're trying to manifest your dreams and aspirations and goals, as it were, you definitely want to write it down with a blue pen rather than just typing it in a computer. That will enhance the process for various reasons. One of those is neurological, and the other is that you're incorporating another modality. So cue cards, underlining, highlighting, shading, bolding, rewriting, coloring, or flashcards, writing down cue cards or flashcards is a great memory technique because you're involving that tactile kinesthetic modality. Now, some people love highlighting and underlining their books, or words in their books, and shading. If you're one of those people that don't want to mess up your book, then you can highlight, shade, or underline your own text when you're rewriting, summarizing, consolidating the information, when you're taking notes, as it were. Color is useful in that regard. Now, I've already alluded to this, but I will just spell it out here. The reason that adding the tactile modality works, or the reason visualizing works in those various modalities is because of the multi-sensory component. Again, you're creating a more enriched memory neurologically by distributing it along different modalities. So, for example, you've got all these sensory modalities like vision, audition, in the somatosensory area or the tactile area, touching, feeling, writing with a pen, taking notes, for instance. This is making your neurological memory more reliable than if you just use a single modality, which is the linguistic auditory modality. So say you're just reading something silently, then that's just one modality, and it's different when you're silently reading than when you're hearing something said. So someone's teaching you, or you're repeating it out loud to yourself, to others. That in itself is different. It's the auditory modality, but when it's spoken out, it's considered a different modality. Now, why does this work? I alluded to this, that neurologically you're creating more complex memory circuits in the brain because you're involving physically different areas of the brain, different locations in the brain. But the hippocampus actually consolidates memory, so it's tying in all these different sensory modalities that you used when you're assimilating, absorbing the information. So experimental findings suggest that depending on the modality of learning, there's different efficiencies of memory. So we remember roughly 20% of what we read, 30% of what we hear, 40% of what we see, 50% of what we say or speak, 60% of what we do kinesthetically or tactilely or behaviorally, and it goes up to 90% if we combine all of those modalities together. Now, you may see different statistics for this, and where they're lower, you might see 10% for reading, 20% for hearing, 30% for seeing. So there's some discrepancies out there, but this is a good ballpark figures for the statistics. So here's an example. When you're studying or taking in new information, in terms of the visual, it's good to draw things, it's good to involve graphics, it's good to sketch, create diagrams, flowcharts, and so forth. So graphs, creating graphs or drawing or making sketches. Now that's why the mind maps work so well, because you're including the visual modality. and you're involving parallelism. And the auditory modality, that's when you're listening to something in real time. You yourself are speaking it out loud versus listening to someone else, or you're teaching. So it's a great idea to get together with people to have a study buddy or learn in groups. And this is more pertinent to an academic situation, but if you're on your own, speaking the information out loud is a good thing to do so you don't get stuck in with that voice in your head, because it's misleading how much information you're actually assimilating when you're just silently reading. Because though you can understand in real time, how much you remember that those learning curves, they go down to about 20% after several weeks. And then we have the tactile, again, flashcards, cue cards, note-taking, and when you're note-taking, you can underline, highlight, shade, etc. So we have visual, auditory, tactile, the primary learning modalities. And there again, to help you remember this, is the different ways of taking information. Sensory inputs, we've got 20% of what we read, 30% of what we hear, 40% of what we see, 50% of what we say, 60% of what we do, and 90% if we combine all of those. Again, you will see discrepancies. You might see those first three or four would be about 10% less. It would be 10, 20, and 30 versus 20, 30, and 40. The important point here is to understand that when you combine all these modalities, you're going to enrich your memory. That's the important point to take away here. So if there's any questions, we could stop here, take a breather. This might be a point to, if you want to take a quick break, grab a glass of water. We can do that. And while we're doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up that mental clarity sound, the alpha sound. So we'll have that in the background, just to understand. So there's the mental clarity sound, the alpha sound. So I'll let you take a 30-second break or a 1-minute break. If you have questions, now would be the chance to put them in. Now would be your time to put them into the chat. Just you can send it to me, to admin, or to everybody. It doesn't matter. Either way, I'll get the message. But if you have any questions about what we just covered, just a quick clarity question, I can take it now. I'm going to go take a 30-second water break, and when I come back, I'll see if there's any questions. If not, we shall continue. So it appears we have no questions at this point, so I will continue. I was aiming for about 75 minutes tonight, with maybe a 10 to 15 minute Q&A if we need that. Yeah, thanks for your suggestion there. Thanks for that. It's a good point, Jean-Louis, that you can actually sing too. So music is, there's lots of sort of musical mnemonics using singing and rhythm to help memorize information. that would be more topic for a full day workshop, but yes, they do use sort of rhythmic techniques and musical techniques in Chinese schools and other places. So now we come to the more kind of advanced accelerated learning techniques. Advanced doesn't mean the more difficult, it just some of these are sort of add-ons that will enrich your learning experience and make it actually fun. So we have big picture reading. What do I mean by that? Well, what we want to do is overview the topics and the themes and the chapters and the summaries of whatever it is you're learning, because it primes your brain for learning. You definitely want to do that before you dive in. That would be different than if you're just reading a fiction book and a story. That's not something you're trying to learn, you're just enjoying it. But anything that you're trying to consolidate into long-term memory, and whether for your job or your business or work or for fun or a hobby, or you're taking a course in school, then this is a technique that you can learn. And it's actually called the survey question, read, recite, review. There's also an SQ5R where they get more specific for those last three components. But this, in a nutshell, is you want to survey your information ahead of time, which is to look at the chapter headings and to look at the summaries of the chapters. And, you can even go into the sort of subtopic, subheadings within the chapters and kind of get a sense of what the different sub-themes are. And so then questioning is part two. You're kind of questioning what is it you're about to learn, and that helps to prime the brain as well. You're actively questioning the material, like what is it, why am I learning this, what is it that I expect to get out of it, what are these main topics, what do they mean? Questioning gets you more engaged, more involved. And then you reading the information, a first run through, and then you want to go back and recite some of the main points that you just learned. You're reciting sort of the main ideas. And this could involve, it's not just looking at the main headings, but now you're looking at not rote reciting every single thing, but reciting the main ideas, main topics. And review is that thing that we already talked about that you do at the end, and you review sort of everything you've just learned. So if you spend 25, 30 minutes, you spend a third of that reviewing. So it's similar with this reading technique, okay? Here's how powerful this is. I use this in an intro psychology course, mainly the survey part, that first part of that. What I did was I had an exam to go to that I hadn't had time to study or read the chapters or even attend class. And the idea was I didn't really have to take that exam because I had aced the first three. And so this was just a bonus. I could afford to drop one of them. So I thought, well, I'll run this experiment. And so what I did was, I said, it doesn't matter how well I do on this test because I've done really good in the first three. So I'll just try this experiment. I had about 70 minutes between classes where I could go and look at the text. There were 3 chapters to learn. I only had time to look at the summaries, and there were like 2 or 3 page summaries per chapter with some of the main themes and topics and ideas. And I read and reread them as many times as I could within that 70-minute period. So that was basically about 20 to 25 minutes per chapter. So I had about 20-some minutes to learn the full extent of each chapter. So not a whole lot of time. But my idea was, since there will be a steep learning curve, I'll probably be able to learn a lot in a short amount of time because I knew nothing going in there. And then by the end, I had all these sort of definitions and words and concepts, and I had described it, it had perfectly described to me in a nutshell in those summaries, because that's what they're designed to do, to give you a way to easily review the information. And so I thought, well, that would be a good way of learning all the information in a short period of time. And so I did that, and I went to the class, and I think I got 70%, either 70 or 75%. And I had only about 70 minutes to learn the content from 3 chapters, and keep in mind, I had no notes, had not been to those particular classes. So that was pretty extraordinary from my point of view, because if you think about, typically you'll spend 10, 20, 30, 40 hours reading, learning, studying, reviewing. So I had only a fraction of that time, but again, because of the way the learning curve works, you can learn a lot in a short amount of time. And then the next 5, 10, 20 hours gives you that extra 20, 25, 28%. Okay, so diminishing returns on that, if I wanted to spend 30 hours studying for that class, and to get the 95%, I have to spend a lot more time. But anyway, that shows you the power of the big picture, that shows you the power of the summary, that shows you the power of that first part of the SQ3R, which is the survey. Now, superfoods. We've definitely spent a lot more time on this during the level 3 program. We spent probably 45 minutes on this pillar, which was nourish the hardware of your brain, nourish neurological hardware and the neurons, so forth. So I'm just reminding you of some of those superfoods, which are nutrient-dense foods that are high in minerals, nutrients, vitamins, and antioxidants. And the nice thing about these whole foods is that they are, the nutrients are synergistically combined, so it's better than taking supplements. So we eat blueberries and goji berries, which are high in antioxidants, and dark chocolate. Then you've got avocados, almonds, walnuts, and wild salmon, where you get your healthy fats. Matcha green tea, again, high in antioxidant, and really good for the brain and for focus, and it doesn't stress you out or make you agitated. There's no crashing with matcha green tea. So great for studying, great for productivity sessions, great for learning, great for keeping your energy focused, yet relaxed throughout the day. And coconut oil is one of the better oils, considered a superfood. It's a source of saturated fats, but healthy saturated fats. And hemp is considered a complete protein, and it's a great snack to have if you need to keep your energy for a long period of time or focus. So again, there's a selection of high nutrient foods or superfoods. We've got the green foods like spirulina, chlorella, E3 Live. E3 Live is my top pick because it's, in my experience and from the research, it's really good for the mind and brain, for alleviating anxiety, depression, for boosting mood, for giving you more energy and more stable energy, and for increasing alertness, focus, concentration, those sorts of things. Chlorella and spirulina are exceptional as well, but E3 Live seems to have something that's not available in those other two, and that is it's a liquid form. It's flash frozen, but you drink it, and it's easy to assimilate, and it's just awesome. Now, as I mentioned in that full day course, proper hydration, ideally water, natural spring water or well water is the best, and you want to hydrate many times a day, and get sufficient amount of water. If you drink a lot of caffeine or soft drinks, you definitely need more water. If you're stressed a lot or you work out, you need more water in those cases, and of course if it's hot out. So this is important for the neurotransmitters because water is involved in the production of neurotransmitters. If you get brain fog, it can be as simple as your brain is dehydrated. There's many reasons for brain fog, but one of them is dehydration. So for mental speed and mental clarity, neurological speed and mental clarity, you want proper hydration, and water is ideal, and high quality water. Remember that proteins are the building blocks. Proteins make up amino acids, which are the building blocks of various neurotransmitters, and you want to get those brain healthy fats. You want to get the omega-3 fatty acids, which are lacking in the modern diet. You want to get sufficient saturated fats like coconut oil and eggs and grass-fed organic butter, and you can also get it from beef and certain meats. You can get those saturated fats, but if you're vegetarian, then you can just stick to coconut oils, and eggs. So that's kind of rounds off the food part. Remember, minerals are very important. Depending when you're female or male, you're lacking various minerals. It can be iron in the case of women and zinc in the case of men, but generally speaking, most people are short of zinc, magnesium, iron, calcium, potassium. These are importantly evolved in neurological processes as well as processes in the body. And B12, the B complex, is especially important for repair. It's especially important for energy transmission in the cells and also in the neurons. And it's important for cognition. So B12 in particular is very important. A number of the B vitamins, B12 is particularly important if people lack B12. It can lead to problems with memory, reduced scores on cognitive tests, and even brain shrinkage. So that's the importance of minerals and vitamins. And the best way to get those is just to eat nutrient-dense foods or superfoods. If you feel like you need supplementation, then make sure you get a reputable, high-quality brand that doesn't put excipients in the supplements, or flowing agents as they're called. Things like magnesium stearate, stearic acid, talc. They are actually toxic, poisonous substances, even though they're in very minute quantities. They're not what your body wants, and they're in a lot of supplement brands because they speed up the manufacturing process. So that's just a little tip. Check your supplements, make sure they have no excipients, ideally, because who knows what the impact is in the long term of taking in those micro poisons with your supplements. That's why, again, I prefer just to go for organic superfoods and make sure I have a good balance of healthy fats and healthy proteins and lots of water. Musical entrainment music is a big topic. It's one of my specialties. I taught a course called Exploring the Musical Brain. Exploring the Musical Brain. And that was a 5-day course for enriched high school students, 5 times roughly 5 hours. So it was about a 25-hour course. I have taught single-day versions of this course, but I'm giving you the super mini version in 5 minutes or less, and more focused on entrainment because this is pertinent to learning. So background music, a lot of people obviously use music in the background or entrainment CDs because you can induce specific brain waves or conducive to learning. We talked about alpha being really important. So slow Baroque music turns out to be one of the best composed forms of music for learning. It's conducive to learning because it initiates and promotes alpha waves. They found that putting alpha slow Baroque music in the background actually accelerates foreign language acquisition significantly. And they have what's called a passive concert and an active concert. So you have the slow Baroque music while you're learning information. Then when you're relearning, reviewing, you have the active concert, and you're playing faster Baroque music. So Baroque music by J.S. Bach is ideal. It's the sort of epitome of the Baroque era is J.S. Bach. But there's, Handel and Telemann and people like that. There's other Baroque composers. Instrumental music is ideal. You don't want to have words. They definitely interfere with most learning processes that involve language and text. So, in most learning situations, you want to have instrumental music. That is music that does not have text or lyrics or vocals, because there's neurological processes that overlap with the language centers and the music centers. So if you're hearing lyrics, you're going to tie up your some of your language areas. If you're having to process language, even if it's in the background and you're trying not to pay attention to it, it's still your brain sort of attempting to understand what's going on, and it's just an interference effect. It's going to get in the way of learning. That you might say is common sense, but not everybody realizes that, and they have the wrong music in the background. So the ideal is to just, if you don't want to have slow Baroque music or say certain types of Mozart selections, Mozart is also good. You might have these specialized auditory applications. I've delved into a number of those, researched some that are quite good. There's the Ultimate Brain by Tom Kenyon. He's got about 8 or 10 CDs for a lot of different purposes. But in terms of learning, you might want to go for Brainwave Suite, and this is just a suite of CDs, 4 CDs that get you into different states, beta, alpha, theta, delta, for various purposes. You want one that's appropriate for learning, low, beta, or alpha. The iMusic Intelligence Suite is a whole series of, well, the iMusic Suite is a whole series of musical applications where they've got modulated sounds, modulated frequencies in the background. They actually modulate the music so to induce certain brainwave states, whether you want to use this for exercising or sleeping or meditating or learning. The one that has to do with learning is called iMusic Intelligence Suite. It's a specific suite of 3 or 4 CDs, which is dedicated to different types of learning. Think Smart is one of them. Think Fast. There's different sort of learning applications that they've designed, these different auditory applications, entrainment applications. And they've tested this. That's a great thing. They've actually tested the before and after, and they've actually compared it to just with music. So what you're doing is, if you could take a Baroque piece and modulate it with these frequencies, and you'd even get the next level of benefit, because they can actually research this stuff and see what happens in the brains of their subjects and how it impacts learning. So that stuff, they've got some research behind it. Tune Your Brain is a series of CDs by Elizabeth Miles. She wrote a book by that title, but there's a bunch of CDs that brings together the music of various composers like Mozart, Bach, and Beethoven, and they're used for various purposes. So the Beethoven is more for euphoria or emotional activation, changing mood states. The Bach can be used for healing. I said it's also useful for learning. And the Mozart one is more dedicated to enhancing the learning process, according to Elizabeth Miles' system. So remember, the music of Bach is not just good for one thing. It's been used in surgery to slow down heart rhythms and stabilize heart rhythms before and after surgery. During and after surgery, I should say. It's been used for healing. I think in a specific case, the specific piece of music had an impact on the maternal and the pregnancy and actually birthing process. That's a long time ago, so I don't remember the reference and the specifics, but it had something to do with the pregnancy or the birthing process. There was a specific piece of Bach's music. But learning is also what we're focusing on here. So, and then finally, the Mental Clarity CD, that's the one you listen to with Robert Coxon. It's just a simple A440. And that was designed specifically for the Dynamind people. They were using this 14 hertz kind of rhythmic pattern to get people alpha, and they wanted something more pleasant, so they got Robert Coxon, who's a famous composer, to create this Mental Clarity CD that they could use to generate alpha during their Dynamind programs. And Dynamind is all about mental programming and inducing the alpha state, anchoring the alpha state. So there you have the Mental Clarity. That's what it looks like. There's all kinds of symbolism, of brain and mental symbolism in that picture, which when I talked to Robert Coxon, he explained that to me. You see the tree and the leaves of the tree. You see the sun. You see the blue. You see that arch. That's all got all sorts of symbolism there, which I don't remember all the symbolism, but he did this for a reason. So again, Mental Clarity is used by the Dynamind people specifically to help people in their classes enter into alpha. There's an example of the Tune Your Mind, Music to Manage Your Mind, Body, and Mood by Elizabeth Miles. So there's the book, and this is an audio companion to the book, which you can actually find 3, 4, half a dozen CDs called the Tune Your Brain series, featuring the music of Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, and others for various purposes, learning among them. That's the Brainwave Suite that I mentioned by Jeffrey Thompson. What's great about this? So you can change your state of mind for relaxation, meditation, creativity, visualization, sleep, and learning. Whereas this CD set is not specifically geared to learning. It's geared to all sorts of different purposes. But what's interesting about Jeffrey Thompson is that he incorporates composed music with animal sounds like dolphins, birds, whales, with quadraphonic sound It seems like it's wrapping around when you're listening to headphones. It's not just stereo, it's beyond stereo. You can call it three-dimensional sound. And then there's also the auditory pulses to get you into these states. So that's all mixed together. Composed music with auditory pulses, with natural animal, real animal sounds and voices, and also bells and singing bowls. So there's a whole bunch of stuff embedded in these CDs, these 4 CDs in this Brainwave suite. And then we've got the iMusic Intelligence Suite. This one is specific to learning and working, analysis, etc. So you might want to be in a low beta state, depending on the nature of what you're learning. You might need a faster brainwave state, but alpha, generally speaking, is good for learning many types of information. So they've done research with this particular series, which is why I like it. And I have used it and tried it, but I've also used the other ones there, particularly the mental clarity and the Tune Your Brain series, because you might just want music in the background. You might not want boring auditory pulses. It depends what your mood is. So this brings us towards the end, and I want to talk about this sleep learning cycle. This is very quick and easy. I did mention this in the intro, so it may be a review for you. But what we know is that you're learning at night. Your brain is learning, it's consolidating the memories and the learnings of the previous day and days prior. So if you get an optimal sleep, a deep sleep, a relaxed sleep, a sleep where you're in slow wave sleep a high percentage of time, and REM sleep a high percentage of time, as high as is ideal, because there's light sleep and deep sleep. Remember, optimal sleep has more percentage of slow wave sleep, delta and theta, and also the REM sleep. So we're learning at night. So we want to have a good sleep, but we want to sort of have a sequence of how we learn. If you have a heavy duty learning sessions during the day, whether or not it's for academia or you're an entrepreneur or you work in a company and you just got to get sort of download a lot of information and be able to retain it, then you're learning that subject matter throughout the day. And as we mentioned, you got those mini review sessions within the learning sessions, the Pomodoro technique, but you're also reviewing all of the information towards the end of the day, so ideally just before bed, because that's the last thing that your mind and brain will see. And then you're going to have a good night's sleep using some of the techniques we suggested in the sleep pillar to optimize sleep. And finally, you wake up and then you can review the material once again. And this is a great way to embed the material, to encode it efficiently, to consolidate it, to create robust memories so that it's solid and you can retrieve it easily at a future date. So that in a nutshell is the ideal sleep learning cycle. Students should do this, but anybody that's learning sort of a large amount of new subject matter, cognitive information, new languages, learning a musical instrument, etc., anything that's sort of challenging, this is a good sequence to do, a sleep learning sequence. So that's it for part 2. We've got it all done in just under 80 minutes. Now we're in 20 minutes, which is what I was aiming for, 75 to 90 minutes. We started at 10 after. So this would be a good time to take questions. And let me know if you have any comments too about the content. But I'm just going to hang out for a few minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, to see if we have any interactions among us. And remember, this replay is recorded. I extended the replay number 1 for an extra 7 days. So what that means is you have in total from 2 weeks for that first part, that first replay, 2 weeks from the date we scheduled it, and you'll have 1 week for part 2. So essentially, both replays will be available for the next 7 days. I was just going to have 7 days per, but I decided to extend the first replay for an additional 7 days in case someone didn't get to it. So you'll have an opportunity within the next 7 days to actually review both replays, and you should see reminder emails coming to you where you can click on that and just look at the replay. And the replay should be not just a YouTube video, but actually you'll see the chat and so forth. There's not a whole lot going on in chat anyway, We didn't do any, we only did one poll today. Oh, Jean-Louis mentioned wheatgrass. Yeah, if you, do you actually, I'm curious if you actually grow your own wheatgrass. You can certainly get wheatgrass at places like Herb and Spice, but it's frozen. You get these little sort of 1 ounces and they're frozen, and you thaw them out, so it's not as fresh. You can get it done for you with the fresh wheatgrass at I forget the name of the smoothie place on Bank Street, if anybody can remember that, but they actually they'll actually crunch the wheatgrass for you and create the liquid for you then and there. It's pretty intense tasting. You got to do a shooter of juice after, but if you want to get a dose of fresh wheatgrass, you can go to that smoothie place, the name of which I cannot remember because I haven't been there in several years. But Jean-Louis suggests homegrown. If you can grow your own wheatgrass, and you can, all the more power to you. You would need one of those. You need a special device to be able to turn that into liquid. Not just any blender will do. You need a specific device for wheatgrass. And thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. Yeah, it sounds like you'll be able to pass the link, the replay link along to Catherine. So I guess if nobody has any more questions or comments, we'll be signing off in a couple minutes. Thanks for your kind comments, Jean-Louis. I appreciate that. I hope you got a lot out of it. I condensed quite a bit of information into just under 3 hours. But keep in mind, the best way to learn this is to use it right away. And/or if you want to take a live workshop with me, I will be going into much more depth for this kind of information over a 6 or 7 hour full day workshop. And ideally, we get to play around with mind maps and peg systems and various mnemonic devices that I didn't get a chance to cover today. We talk about some of the research and experiments, and we do some mental programming exercises 2-3 times throughout the day to help consolidate the information. We get you in an alpha state. There's lots of things I would be able to do in a live session that went from, say, 10 to 5 that I can't do now. But I wanted to give you the key information as much as I can give in a 3 hour period. So thanks, Doug and Wendy, too. Yep, as I say, you can answer questions. You can ask me questions in the replay. If you have any questions while you're watching the replay, something that comes up that you didn't think of tonight, you send a question in the chat box there, and it should get to me at my Gmail address. Okay, so there's different vibrational technologies. I'm not sure what exactly you're referring to, Jean-Louis. There are different systems out there to vibrate the body. I think that's what you're referring to. If you can specifically name a couple, then I'll know what you're talking about. I don't actually have any of those devices, but I have sort of tried them at fairs and so forth, if we're talking about the same thing. But yes, there is one that I'm familiar with as MRS. It's a vibrational, it's a mat that it induces electromagnetic vibrations and so forth. And at a certain frequencies, it's good to loosen up the cell, actually increase the circulation and make it easier, for instance, for massage therapists to do their work. So that's an MRS technology. I know a few people that have that. You could call that a vibrational technology. There's some that you can just lie down on, and they actually physically vibrate you, and that's known to be healthy. So yeah, if you have any suggestions, please, if you've got some ideas around that, generally just send it to me. You can send it to me later or during the replay, or send it to my Gmail account or my Kojiko account. And I'd love to hear about what you have in mind. Because with everything I've mentioned, there's a whole lot more that's available. It gets pretty fancy. Okay, I think we're going to sign off now for tonight. It's 9:33 roughly. So thanks, everyone. Have yourself a great evening. Hope you apply this stuff. If you want to have a quick review, you can. You'll see the review replay available over the next 7 days. Keep in mind, if you just want to fast forward, you can click on the YouTube link and then you can fast forward or jump to various points in the video, so you don't have to listen to the whole thing. Okay, have a great evening. And keep in mind, I'll be doing a free webinar series on different, all things brain related. I did creativity, but I'll be doing nutrition, Alzheimer's, yoga, stress, and other topics. So if you're interested in that, let me know. I will keep you in mind. I'll be posting on Facebook too. Without further ado, have yourself a great evening, and hope you employ as many of these techniques as you can over the coming days and weeks. Good night, everyone. Bye.